What's going on, folks? This is Gino with the Playmakers Corner podcast, and we are going to keep it rolling here in this episode with some player spotlights. I've got 4 players here that I'm going to be highlighting for the 2025 fall season. We're going to be looking through each player's path to becoming a starter on varsity, and then we're going to be going through each player's film grades going into this season, and we'll finish it up by talking about each player's recruiting thus far. This will be a fun, chill episode, so just sit back, relax, and let's talk some football. First up here for our player spotlights, coming out of Castle Rock, Colorado, we got Nolan Case. Case is a wide receiver at Douglas County. He graduates in 2026. He's standing at about 6 foot and around 190 pounds. He is playing with Mile High Prep this spring, and he also plays lacrosse. This will be Case's 3rd year on varsity for Douglas County, so let's go ahead and check out some stats for him here. His sophomore year, he saw limited action, getting 32 receptions for 372 yards and 3 touchdowns, and then rushing the ball, he added 14 carries for 103 yards. He definitely stepped it up his junior year, though, with a massive climb in statistics. He saw 59 receptions for 834 yards and 5 touchdowns. And then rushing the ball, he was fantastic, getting 62 carries for 334 yards and 4 touchdowns. So really just doing everything that Douglas County has needed him to do. Looking at some key games here in his junior year, he had 9 receptions for 169 yards and a touchdown. And then he also added 7 carries for 30 yards in a 3-point win over Fountain Fort Carson. And that was a game I actually got to witness myself. I was at that game on the sidelines. And Case was just lighting up that Fountain Fort Carson defense that is actually loaded with playmakers. Next up here, he had 5 receptions for 112 yards and a touchdown in a loss against Castleview. He had 4 receptions for 121 yards and a touchdown in a 3-point loss against Chatfield. He had 9 receptions for 117 yards, and then he added 10 carries for 59 yards and 2 touchdowns in a win over Chaparral. And then finally, he had 9 receptions for 88 yards and a touchdown. And then he also added 16 carries for 81 yards in a very tough playoff loss to a very good Arapahoe squad. So as you can see, Douglas County goes to Case in the games they're winning by a lot, and the games that are close, and the games they're getting blown out in. It doesn't matter. Case is always going to get the ball because he truly is the catalyst of that offense. So Case definitely stuffs the stat sheet, but let's go ahead and look at his film grades now. I got his 3 best and his 3 lowest grades, and then we're just going to go through them all, and then I have a little bit of a breakdown at the end here. His best grades, out of 10, his hands are rated at 8.5. For his frame, it's an 8.2 out of 10. And then for his acceleration and tackle breaking, that comes in at a staggering 4.4 out of 5. For his lowest grades here, you're going to be seeing a little bit of a trend here. His contested catch is at a 3.5 out of 5, so not terrible there. His jump ball is a 3 out of 5, could definitely use some work. And then his run blocking and then blocking on screens, that is going to be a 3.3 out of 5. So those are his 3 lowest and 3 highest. Let's go ahead and look at the general scope of his grades. His frame's at an 8.2, 6 foot, and he's pretty well built. He breaks tackles really well, so there's really a lot to like there as far as his build goes. His versatility is great because he can be your running back, he can be your lead wide receiver, he can do whatever you need him to do. Looking at his blocking, we saw some decent blocking film in his MHP film against Houston, so there's definitely some potential there. We just want to see some more as far as finishing the block and just getting lower. He's a little bit just kind of standing a little too tall on the blocks, so that is definitely something that could scoot that grade up. His hands are at an 8.5. I did not see him drop any passes against Fountain Fort Carson. I can't speak for the rest of the games. But, just judging by the film and what I saw in person, I was very impressed with what I saw as far as hands goes. His ball skills, as far as adjusting to the ball, is a 4.3. That's a very good score there. His release is a 3.8. You'd like to see him use a bit more of that acceleration and just be able to get around defenders a little more. Definitely could use some work there. His route running is at an 8, which is a good score, but definitely with his potential could easily go up. His agility's at a 4, speed at a 4.3, and acceleration at 4.4. You really get to see that when he gets the ball in space or when he's being used as a running back. He just has a great sense of what to do with the ball, and you really get to see that athleticism just jump off the screen when the ball's in his hands. So like I said before, his contested catch is at a 3.5, but his hands are an 8.5, so you'd really just like to see him be able to use those great hands on tougher balls and just make himself a more complete receiver. His route tree is at a 4. He can go deep, he can go short, he can really do whatever you need him to do. His run after the catch is at a 4, and like I said before, this is a kid that gets snaps at running back. He gets the ball in space. He's used to being able to see where the blocks are, where the holes are, and just where to go. His jump ball's at a 3. To be honest, there's not a lot of opportunity for jump balls, especially with where he's being used. He's not going deep a ton of the time, so it's kind of tough to get film on that. That score could definitely be better. We'll see what happens here in his senior year. And now looking at these final 2 grades here for Case, we have his tackle breaking at 4.1 and his balance or body control at 4.4. So definitely some good grades there. His overall grade here is going to be a 79.8 out of 100. That is very solid, especially for a player that is pretty much under the radar as far as recruiting goes here. So let's go ahead and break this all down here for Nolan Case. In a year where Douglas County lost tons of talent the year before in the trenches and in the running back room, and a year where they saw a bunch of fluctuation in their quarterback room, the Huskies had potentially the most underrated wide receiver prospect in all of Colorado emerge in Nolan Case. I got to witness Case in his best game of the season against Fountain Fort Carson, and what I saw there was nothing short of spectacular. He was bringing that Douglas County offense to life with his ridiculous yards after the catch and tackle breaking ability. His film shows a player that embraces contact and will do whatever his team needs him to do. He can be a running back, we saw that against Arapahoe and Chaparral, and he can be your go-to receiver at the same time, as we saw in numerous games throughout the season. As far as offers go, Case currently has 1 offer to play at Fort Lewis, but I expect that to change very quickly here as we get through summer workouts and the season in the fall. He has a few camp invites lined up here for this summer, but I have no doubt that Nolan Case is going to be a top name here in 5A for the 2025 fall season. Looking at some key games here potentially for their next season here for Douglas County, we got a rival game against Castleview at home on September 18th, and then the next week they traveled to Chatfield to try and get revenge there on September 25th. Following that week, they'll be facing Fountain Fort Carson at home this time on October 3rd, and then you follow that up with a game at Pine Creek on October 9th. Their next big game after that Pine Creek game will be at home against DJ Bordeaux and the Legend Titans on October 24th. Moving on now, our next player we're going to look at here is one of the more established players here, especially at the wide receiver position. I am talking about the wide receiver out of Mesa Ridge, Kobe Dooley. Dooley is entering his senior year at Mesa Ridge. His first 2 years were over at Vista Ridge, and he absolutely dominated there from the get-go. Looking at the stats here for Dooley, starting out his freshman year, he was a big-time contributor over at Vista Ridge. He had 26 receptions for 330 yards and 4 touchdowns. His sophomore year, he bumped those numbers up to 31 receptions for 525 yards and 4 touchdowns. And then his junior year, he transferred over to Mesa Ridge and joined a very powerful offense. And he only got to play 5 regular season games due to the transfer rules, but that didn't stop him from putting up some monstrous numbers. Between the 5 regular season games and the 2 playoff games, He put up 25 receptions for 538 yards and 8 touchdowns. Some key games here. He put up 4 receptions for 96 yards and 3 touchdowns against Dooley. He had 7 receptions for 191 yards and 2 touchdowns in a 3-point win over Monarch, and that was in the playoff, folks. So you already know Dooley is stepping it up when his team needs him the most. And then finally, he had 4 receptions for 89 yards and 1 touchdown in the state semifinals. And looking at Dooley's film, there is a lot to be excited about. Let's go ahead and check out some of his highest grades here before we check out the entire list. His versatility is a 9 out of 10. His route running is a 9 out of 10 as well. And then his speed and then his running after the catch, that is a 4.5 out of 5. Some of his lowest grades, though, his frame is a 5 out of 10. His contested catch is a 3.5 out of 5. And then his jump ball is a 3 out of 5. So let's go ahead and check out the rest of his grades here. So for frame, he gets a 5 out of 10. That is just because, he's 5'8" and just shy of 170 pounds. That's not great, especially when you think about college defenders, but he makes up for that in so many different places, including his versatility, which hits at a 9 out of 10. He can run short routes, he can go deep, he can do whatever you need him to do. His blocking gets a 3 out of 5. He could definitely work on that there. And then his hands are an 8.3. He rarely drops the ball. Super reliable, especially in a high-powered and pass-heavy offense. That's great to see. His ball skills and just adjusting to the throw, that gets a 4.2. His release is a 4.3 out of 5, and that ball skills was out of 5 as well. His route running, as we highlighted before, is a 9. That is a big area to be very good at. And honestly, Kobe Dooley is one of the best in the state at route running. His route tree is as complete as you could ask for here. His agility is a 4.4 out of 5. His speed gets a 4.5 out of 5. Acceleration, 4.4. These are very, very important tools for a receiver to have. Now, looking at his contested catch and his jump ball scores, he gets a 3.5 for his contested catch and then a 3 for his jump ball. When you're standing at 5'8", it's definitely going to be a little bit tougher to get those jump balls. But, it's still definitely an area that he could work on, and I trust that he will. Tackle breaking, 4.1, and then balance and body control, 4.4. So he is a very, very well-rounded receiver here. His final film grade as of the start of his senior year comes in at 80.1. But make no mistake, Kobe Dooley is a game wrecker in Colorado. He's lethal on special teams with his elite speed and agility, and he has the ability to score whenever he touches the ball and is extremely tough to stop in man. His speed makes him somebody that requires safety attention, and that is something that can change a whole game. He is also a refined route runner with a good release. On the next level, he is probably for sure a slot receiver, but with his athleticism, he will find ways to contribute. Going into his senior year with Leland, he should continue to prove why he's the biggest threat at receiver in the state. Dooley is a pure athlete that is dominated not just on the gridiron, but in track and field as well. His 40, 100, 200, and 400 numbers jump off the screen, and that absolutely translates on the football field. If you want to know anything about his big game ability, Dooley was the number 1 option in the playoffs on a loaded Mesa Ridge offense. He averaged a ridiculous 21.5 yards per catch as a junior, helping push Mesa Ridge to the state semifinals. He has a killer mentality with the ball in his hands, and he is so hard to try and stay in front of or near as a man defender. You're not going to find many wide receiver prospects with the combination of speed and route running that this kid provides. Between his veteran leadership, his ability as a player, and his work as a multi-sport athlete, there's just a lot to like here from a scouting perspective. Dooley currently has 2 offers, one of them being to play at Colorado State to be a Ram, and then another one to play at Fort Lewis. But with numerous camps lined up this summer, I expect his number of offers to absolutely skyrocket here in the near future. Now, Mesa Ridge doesn't have their full schedule up for next year, but looking ahead to some key games that could affect their playoff eligibility, we got Dakota Ridge on September 12th. That one is at home, and then they play at Heritage in the next week on September 18th. All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and move on to our next player here. We're going to stay at Mesa Ridge, though, and talk about their senior running back, Trevon Salas. Salas stands at 5'11", 210 pounds, and 2025 will be his fourth year as Mesa Ridge's starting running back. Looking at the stats here, in his freshman year, he was very productive, getting 150 carries for 846 yards and 9 touchdowns. As a sophomore, Salas racked up 138 carries for 865 yards and 7 touchdowns. But in his junior year last year, we saw the biggest leap for him. He bumped up all of his numbers in every single category. Let's check it out. He had 161 carries for 1,071 yards and 15 touchdowns. And then in the receiving room, he also racked up 19 receptions for 211 yards and 1 touchdown. Really exciting that he is starting to add that dimension to his game. Looking at his key games, though, he put up 24 carries for 105 yards and a touchdown in a win over Heritage. Then he had 20 carries for 138 yards and 2 touchdowns in a 3-point loss to Pueblo West. And then against Monarch in the playoffs, he put up 15 carries for 144 yards and 1 touchdown in that 3-point win to advance to the semifinals. Let's go ahead and now take a look at some of Trevon's film grades. Some of his highest grades. First up here, we got his frame coming in at an 8.5. Standing at 5'11", 210 pounds, he has a powerful build that he definitely uses. His first level vision grade gets a 4.1 out of 5. He does a very solid job of seeing that initial gap. And then his straight line speed gets an 8.2 out of 10. He is very, very fast despite his powerful build. Looking at some of his lowest grades, though, we're going to see a bit of a trend here. We get contested catches, that's a 3 out of 5. His route running gets a 3 out of 5. And then his pass blocking, his yards after the catch, threat, and second level vision grades all get a 3.5 out of 5. So not terrible, but definitely needs to be worked on here. But looking at the general scope of Salas's film, his versatility comes in at 8 out of 10. He can definitely play in a multitude of schemes, but his lowest grades here, as you're going to see, are going to be in the receiving game. He could definitely work on that part of his game. He already did, as we saw as a junior. He added 19 receptions for 200 yards and a touchdown, which are all career highs. But honestly, when you look at the film, you would like to see more, especially from a route running perspective and just honestly a blocking perspective. His blocking grade isn't great. It's at 3.5, but with his projectable build and his explosiveness, these are all things that can be refined as he moves on to the next level. His acceleration gets an 8.1, straight line speed 8.2, his agility, which are just like cuts and change of direction, that is an 8 out of 10. His balance and body control comes in at 4 out of 5. Elusiveness and cut ability, 3.8 out of 5. His tackle breaking gets a 4. And as I highlighted before, that pass blocking grade is a 3.5 out of 5. So his final grade here is a 76.7 out of 100. And that is absolutely a grade that I expect to go up near the 80s or over into the 80s as we get into his senior year. These are all things that I know Trevon is going to work on in the offseason. He works very hard in the weight room. We see progression in every single year that he's been a starter, and that's what you love to see. So as far as things you want him to work on, the receiving game, as I highlighted before, and then really just his cut ability. Right now he's a one cut back pretty much, and you want him to work on that so he can become even more of a dynamic running back here for this Mesa Ridge offense. So let's go ahead and break this all down here for Trevon Salas. He has been a massive piece of this lethal Mesa Ridge offense from his freshman season all the way to now. Together with Kobe Dooley and Leland Frescaz, this Mesa Ridge offense should once again be one of the most deadliest offenses in the state, regardless of classification. I have no doubt in my mind that Salas is going to be coming into his senior year hungrier than he's ever been before, and that we will see a huge leap in his game. He has remained healthy despite his heavy usage, which adds another dimension to his already thick resume as a college prospect. He shows coachability in the way that he has already started to work on his playmaking as a receiver as well, putting up a career-high 19 receptions and over 200 yards as a junior. You can absolutely expect that Salas is going to continue to work on that part of his game, as he will likely be the premier feature of this Mesa Ridge offense in 2025. Definitely look out for some monstrous numbers here from Trevon Salas in his senior season. Looking at his offers, he's got two here, one being to Fort Lewis and then to South Dakota School of Mines. A couple of very solid schools there. And, he is another guy that has a lot of camp invites coming up, and he is working on getting his name out there for recruiting. Any team looking for a player that is constantly putting in the work and looking for ways to elevate their game needs to take a look at Trevon Salas. Looking at key games here going into this next season for Mesa Ridge, we have Dakota Ridge on 9/12. That is September 12th at home. And then they play at Heritage in the next week on September 18th. And lastly here, folks, the final player I'm going to highlight in this episode is going to be a player that I saw play against Douglas County, a game that I also got to see Nolan Case play in. And it really just put both of these players on the map for me. I am talking about the 2027 running back out of Fountain Fort Carson, Dakari Releford. Releford is standing at 5'8", 165 pounds, and he is going into his second year as a varsity running back here for Fountain Fort Carson. And he also is on the track and field team here for the Trojans. Looking at the stats, he had a very productive sophomore year. He had 99 carries for 576 yards and 8 touchdowns. Looking at the key games here, he had 17 carries for 127 yards and 2 touchdowns in a blowout win over Denver South. And then, as I highlighted before, he had 11 carries, 61 yards, and 2 touchdowns in a 3-point loss against Douglas County. And they kind of stopped handing him the ball in the second half. And then Douglas County came back and won the game. I don't know. I think Releford is quite important to this offense, as we see here, as they kind of started to lean on him later on in the year. He had 8 carries for 113 yards and 1 touchdown in a tough loss to Legend. And then finally, he had 10 carries for 117 yards and 1 touchdown in a big win over Chaparral. With his stats definitely going up later in the season, it looked like the Trojans were really leaning on him down the stretch there, and that is great to see as we go into his junior season here. But let's go ahead and look at his film grades here. Coming up first, his number 1 grade is going to be his acceleration, coming in at 8.4 out of 10. And then his straight line speed and his agility both come in at 8.2 out of 10, and his balance and body control get a 4.1 out of 5. His lowest film grades are going to be his frame, coming in at 4.5 out of 10. It is tough to be a 5'8" running back, and standing at 165 pounds, it makes it a lot tougher for you to be a workhorse back with that. But, with him just being a sophomore, there's plenty of time to put on weight there. His pass blocking grade gets a 2, and his route running comes in at a 3 out of 5. But let's go ahead and check out the more general scope of Releford's film grades. His versatility gets a 7 out of 10, and honestly, that just comes from him not getting enough usage and not really getting to see the full scope of what his game could be. His first level vision gets a 4 out of 10. He does a pretty solid job there of reading the initial blocks. His second level vision, however, drops down to a 3.8. That's definitely a level of his game that he's going to want to work on. His contested catches actually gets a 3.5, and that's a lot higher than some of the other running backs in that we're kind of just looking at here for the 2027 and 2026 classes. So it's cool to see that Releford has that part of his game. Yeah, really a lot of his receiving scores are going to be a bit higher than some of the other players that we've been looking at. His hands have a 4 out of 5. He gets a 3.5 for his RAC threat, and then his route running comes in at 3. So that route running could definitely be worked on, but everything else definitely above par here. His acceleration was his highest score, coming in here at 8.4. His straight line speed at 8.2, as well as his agility also at 8.2 there. His balance and body control are a 4.1 out of 5. And his elusiveness is a 4 out of 5 here. And then his final 2 scores will be tackle breaking, coming in at 3.8, and his pass blocking at a 2. His final score is going to be a 72 out of 100. Releford is only just a junior, though, so there's a lot of room to grow. He is just scratching that surface, and I really like what I've seen so far from him. He has great agility and a good burst that allows him to cut up defense and get an opening. On top of that, despite his smaller frame, he has good contact balance, and he will fight for extra yards and just break tackles. If this Found for Carson line can figure it out, then he should be guaranteed 1,000 yards next year. But this line is not slated to be great this season, so we will see how he responds to that in his junior year and if he can break out regardless of his line shortcomings. But just kind of breaking this all down here for Dakari Releford, a player like Releford is just so valuable to an offense. He possesses rare acceleration and agility to make up for his smaller frame, and this allows for him to be a very dynamic player with the ball in his hand. The Trojans started to lean on him there in the back half of the season, and that is where much of his production came from. If you compare him with a bruiser running back, then that will make Dakari even more of a lethal threat. I think it obviously would be huge for him if he put on a few pounds and maybe even added another dimension to his game, like returning kicks or punts, and that would help his recruiting profile a ton. He seems to be slated to take over as a starting running back here for Found for Carson here in 2025, so it'll be cool to see what numbers he puts up with a much bigger workload. Looking at the recruiting here for Releford, no offers here so far, but his offers should definitely start to heat up here. He has a special kind of agility and acceleration, and he just needs to stay grinding, and those offers will come soon enough. Looking at Found for Carson's schedule coming into next season here, they got a few important games and a very tough schedule. First off here, they got a game at Douglas County on October 3rd. And the next week, they play Regis at home on October 10th. And then on October 16th, they will play Legend at Legend. And then 2 weeks after that, they will be playing at Pine Creek on October 31st. And that, folks, is going to wrap up this episode here. Thank you all so much for listening. We have a really, really special set of players that are coming into this next season, and it should be a great year. I'm going to have more player spotlights coming out here in the coming weeks, so keep an eye out for those. And again, thank you so much for listening. This is Gino with the Playmakers Corner podcast, and I will see you all next time. Peace out.